The Rwanda issue is something that dogged the end of the last Conservative government and is now beginning to disturb not only the present government but also Europe. And we'll come to that in a second. But first, I have to establish beyond the economic and migration partnership which Britain formed with Rwanda and which then led to the building of houses and centres to accommodate migrants who were sent to Rwanda, spending £250 million on a scheme which was designed to deter refugees from coming to the UK. Rwanda was questioned by the Supreme Court in Britain for being an unsafe country. And although there's a lot of rhetoric to the contrary, although there was even a third law put out among those Suella Braverman laws, there's the illegal immigration law, there's the nationality and borders law, and then there's the Rwanda law, which is admittedly put out under James Cleverly, but nevertheless is part of that structure, envisaged by Suella Braverman to deter refugees from coming to the UK by illegal routes. Now, under the 1951 Refugee Convention, which we're still signatories to, even if somebody comes to a country by an illegal route, they must be considered for asylum. We have decided not to do that, or at least the last Conservative government decided not to do that, in defiance not only of the 1951 Refugee Convention, but also in defiance of their own 2019 manifesto, which provided a commitment to processing asylum applications. So when James Cleverly talks about mandates, he is clearly not thinking about the mandates under which he operated as Home Secretary during the last government. He was talking yesterday about, on the front page of the Daily Express, rather ridiculously, about the Labour Party not having a mandate to stop the winter fuel payment, to axe the winter fuel payment to pensioners. It's not something I approve of. I don't endorse the Labour Party for its decision about pensioners. But I certainly don't think that James Cleverly has any right to talk about the value of an electoral mandate. And to look more closely at the Rwanda problem, the problem lies in events in 2018 which have never been satisfactorily explained, which have there's been no published documentation about an investigation, an inquiry, and the Rwandan government just hope these things have disappeared into the background. Suella Braverman, when she was questioned on the BBC by Laura Quensberg, was questioned about 12 refugees who were shot in 2018. Actually, there were 13. The 13th one was a man called Elisi Kanyandekwe on a second event, and there were two shootings. Both of them involved people from the Kaziba camp who marched in protest at the way they were being treated and the fact they were being denied food. 3,000 to 4,000 people marched or walked for 2 hours to trying to get support. They were met with armed officers who shot them. There were 23 people seriously injured. In March, so I think the one event was in February, one event was in April, and in March, right in the middle of all this, a large number of Burundi refugees were arrested simply because they questioned the procedures that they were required to go through in order to be accommodated. This is an authoritarian and an abusive regime, and clearly a regime that likes to hide the evidence, because we should have seen information about these abuses. And 13 people who have been killed simply for simply for questioning the system. I question the system. Am I to be next on the list of the Rwandan state troopers? But that accommodation exists and has been built to a high standard. And Keir Starmer's decision to scrap this Rwanda deportation scheme, the 290 million scheme, which is going to be costing us more money every year if it goes ahead. He saves money and he saves our reputation. This scheme, which was introduced under Boris Johnson and then pushed forward under Rishi Sunak, aimed to deter. It was a deterrence operation. And deterrence, I don't think, really works. What we have to do is we have to stop the trafficking and the illegal trade in smuggling, and that means stopping the smugglers. It's hard because it's the same sort of issues that dog the drug trade. But there are solutions. One of the solutions would be to put consulates in the north of France, in the north of Africa, in Turkey and so on, to stop that trade across the waters. And that would be a stronger deterrent. It would be a positive. Instead of the proponents of Rwanda saw that as the solution. They were mixing up the problem with the solution. And it faced significant legal challenges, public criticism, and a failure in reality to deport a single significant migrant. Labour, upon coming into office, have abandoned the scheme, as they said they would, with Starmer labelling it an expensive gimmick and reallocating resources to more intelligent-led anti-smuggling strategies. They won't work either, by the way. This decision aligns with Labour's broader focus on targeting the criminal gangs profiting from illegal crossings, absolutely, and bolstering border security through collaboration with intelligence agencies like MI5, MI6, GCHQ. Actually, to a lesser extent, the Conservative government was already doing that. So Home Office Secretary Yvette Cooper has stressed the moral imperative of dismantling these networks. She's right, especially after the tragic deaths of migrants in the Channel, including children in the last few days. Despite Labour's emphasis on disrupting smuggling operations, critics, particularly from the Conservative Party, have framed the abandonment of the Rwanda plan as a dangerous move. I don't think it's dangerous at all. I think it's a wise move, but it is a waste of money. Robert Jenrick, a prominent figure who wants to be the next Conservative leader, has claimed that Labour has abandoned, quote, the one credible deterrent against small boat crossings. Now, he may be right in that. But the fact that they've only got one credible deterrent doesn't mean it's the right credible deterrent. He's a clever boy, but he's not clever enough. And the former Home Secretary, Suella, Braverman, warned that the decision could make the UK a soft touch for illegal migrants. Absolutely. Without those consulates set up in France, this is a problem that will just keep running. And more than that, we have a second issue. After Theresa May, the Home Office has been on a go slow. It has interpreted her edict for a hostile environment as a plan to do less work or to work in other areas. And a lot of the people who are processing asylum applications have been moved on to other stuff. She and Priti Patel have complained, and Kemi Badenoch have complained, that the people who are working in the Home Office are people who don't want to deport asylum seekers. Well, no, actually, surely anybody who is working in the Home Office would want to help. And this is the problem again, that there is confusion about being a safety net, being a source of help, and being the gatekeeper. You can't be both, actually. Though what is interesting is in almost every single case, Ofcom, Ofsted, and psychiatrists for reality TV, they're doing the two jobs. It is nonsensical to the point it is the stuff that demands ridicule. So adding to the complexity of this debate now, Germany's Migration Commissioner Joachim Stamp has proposed using the asylum facilities built in Rwanda under the UK scheme for EU deportations. Now, that's slightly different to sending people automatically to Rwanda simply because they've come to Britain by an illegal route. This is about the third country. This is about where do you send people who can't be sent back home. So they're not quite being sent to Rwanda to be processed as asylum seekers. They're being sent to Rwanda as a third country. Now, I would strongly suggest that Britain should do something fairly similar. But that means that Britain and the Home Office have got to get its act together and start processing the applications, all of them. And this is ironic. It's reignited discussions about whether offshore processing is a viable solution for the EU. Well, I'm not sure that's what Germany is actually proposing. It's a different version of the scheme which is being proposed, for example, with Italy and Albania. For Italy and Albania, it's about offshoring migrants until they can be processed. And then they would be processed and then brought into Italy. But what would happen to those migrants who were rejected? Maybe they would be assumed into Albania. But it's a different scheme to the Rwanda scheme. And in both schemes, there has to be the question of what do you do with those migrants who you cannot send back to their country of origin if they fail to meet the criteria for refugee status? What do you do with them? Because you can't just reject them and then tell them to go if they've got nowhere to go to. Rwanda is a solution, and there's accommodation for them. And once they're in Rwanda, the host country, Germany, Italy, Britain, would have no further responsibility for them. If, on the other hand, the Rwanda scheme as proposed by Suella Braverman were to go ahead, Britain would still have responsibility for those people in Rwanda, whatever happened in Rwanda. And Rwanda is not a stable country. It is at war with its neighbours, in all but name. If that war were to spread, what would happen to the refugees that were morally our responsibility? Morally, ethically, politically our responsibility. Would we be able to get them out of the country in time, or would this be another instance where our word is completely irrelevant? Would this be another instance where Dominic Raab would be sunning himself on the beach in Crete rather than doing anything of substance? Because there's still people in Afghanistan who we gave our word to who are stuck, either in hiding or trying desperately to get out of the country. Our responsibility. And there's a moral aspect to all of this discussion. So Rwanda, I think, is a viable solution for some element of offshoring. And the Conservatives will quite happily say that the UK may have squandered a potential deterrent by scrapping the Rwanda plan. They haven't, but they may have squandered building sites and accommodation and access to that accommodation, which may ultimately prove efficacious in scrapping the Rwanda plan. What the present government needs to do is to enter into negotiations with the Rwandan government to be able to make use of the accommodation which it built, particularly for sending people who have had their asylum application rejected and who have no country to go back to. Particularly because Rwanda has given an assurance that it won't be involved in refoulement. That is enough. Labour's decision marks a sharp policy shift, focusing more on tackling the root causes of illegal immigration and less on the controversial high-cost deterrence, and that's right. But it's still approaching this problem with rhetoric rather than real action. While critics argue that the move leaves the UK vulnerable to increased migration, which I suspect it does, Labour's leadership seems determined to address the problem through stronger international cooperation and a more targeted approach to dismantling the criminal networks. If it can do that, that's great. But it also, I think, needs to make it pointless to cross the channel. And it could lead the way very easily in that process by starting the asylum application in France, by starting the asylum application in Africa, by starting it in Turkey, by cutting out the need for small boats entirely. And whether this new strategy would be more effective than the Rwanda scheme, it will certainly be morally more beneficial, but it remains a key question as the migration crisis continues to dominate the political landscape. It's not going to go away.